Welcome to the Daily Views on September 13th, 2021. Let's start in London in the UK. In England, more people are waiting for routine hospital treatment than ever since records began. At the end of July, it was 5.6 million people, according to current figures from the British National Health Service, the NHS, which were released on Thursday. The previous records have been broken again and again for months. The record began in 2007. To reduce the backlog, the UK government wants to increase social security contributions. The additional income should benefit a long-term care reform. Because of the ongoing corona pandemic, hospitals are facing a significant double burden. This leaves its mark even in emergency care. Instead of responding to emergency calls within 7 minutes as intended, English patients had to wait an average of 8.5 minutes in August, according to the health service. And now, let's go to New York in the United States. The Perseverance rover has taken a second sample from Mars rock and has already carried out initial investigations on the two samples. The US space agency NASA announced on Friday that the rock consists of basalt and could have been formed by lava outpouring. In addition, salt minerals were discovered in it, which could indicate that water may have been present in this area of the planet for a longer period of time, and thus potentially life could have been possible. Last week, NASA announced that the rover had taken a first sample from Mars rock and stowed it safely. The second drilling took place a few days later. A first attempt to drill failed in August because the rock was not strong enough and could not be filled into the sample tube. The now successfully removed and stowed sample, which is only slightly thicker than a pencil, is to be sent to Earth and examined. Exactly how and when is currently still being planned. Perseverance landed on Mars in a quite risky maneuver at the end of February. The development and construction of the approximately $2.5 billion rover had taken 8 years. Oh boy, that's money. Now let's go to Brussels in Belgium. According to Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, NATO has initiated a comprehensive investigation into the disastrous Afghanistan mission. He said, "The events of the last few weeks have been tragic for the Afghans and shocking for all who support them." He wrote that in a guest article for the German newspaper Welt am Sonntag. "There are many difficult questions regarding NATO's engagement that must now be asked honestly. We have to learn from it," he wrote. At the same time, Stoltenberg made it clear that the military alliance does not want to withdraw completely. Afghanistan will not be the last crisis in which North America and Europe have to act together with the help of NATO, he said, the former Norwegian head of government. And he said, "There will always be someone who wants to harm us. We saw this on September 11th and since then in many other terrorist attacks." In Afghanistan, the militant Islamist Taliban had recently regained power shortly after the end of the NATO military operation in that country. The aim of the almost 2 decades of operation was actually to prevent that. And now let's go to Washington in the United States. The US government has temporarily stopped evacuating flights with Afghan people in need of protection to the US because of several measles cases. There were 4 cases of measles among Afghans who landed in the US, White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said on Friday. The people concerned are in quarantine. The CDC Health Authority recommended that the flights be suspended for the time being. Among other things, the USA uses the US Air Force Base Ramstein in Rhineland-Palatinate in Germany as one of the several hubs for its evacuation mission from Afghanistan. From there, the onward journey of the numerous people who were flown out by the US Army after the militant Islamist Taliban came to power is organized. Psaki did not provide any further information on how long the provisional stop will last. A vaccination against measles is a prerequisite for Afghans to enter the USA, said Psaki. They are now looking to see whether vaccinations can also be given to the bases outside the USA where the Afghans are housed. And now let's go to Quito in Ecuador. Indigenous groups from South America have welcomed the acceptance of their application for greater protection of the Amazon region at the World Conservation Congress as an important step. The Congress of the World Conservation Union, the IUCN, voted on Friday in Marseille for the indigenous people's submission to call for the protection of 80% of the Amazon region by 2025 in order to avoid the so-called tipping point from which the Amazon region turns into steppe. The General Director and the member countries of the IUCN are called upon to support the goal and, for example, to advocate the indigenous peoples and that they can manage newly protected areas themselves. The World Conservation Union, founded in 1948 with the United States and private actors from all over the world, are now involved in nature conservation and publishes, among other things, the International Red List of Threatened Species. Experts from more than 160 countries are currently advising for 1 week, among other things, on the protection of water reserves and adaptation to climate change. The application was submitted by the umbrella organization of indigenous groups in the Amazon basin, the so-called COICA, among others. COICA coordinator José Gregorio Díaz Mirabal called for measures that take into account the specificity and diversity of the ecosystems and the people who inhabit them. The indigenous people came to defend their homeland and thus also to protect the planet. The COICA, based in Quito, represents more than 2 million indigenous people in South America. They cite scientific studies, including those by the World Food Organization, which recently showed that indigenous peoples are the best keepers of the forest in the fight against environmental damage and, of course, climate change. The Amazon basin plays a key role in the global climate. And one more time, we have to go to New York in the United States. At the end of a gloomy stock market week, the US indices expand their losses in late trading on Friday. After the price increases of the past few months, market participants were more focused on the dangers of rising inflation, a possible tightening of monetary policy, rising Delta infections, and high valuations. In addition, heavy price losses on Apple shares weighed on. The leading Dow Jones Industrial Index fell back to its lowest level since the end of July. It closed just a few meters above its low for the day, which is reached shortly before the market closed with minus 0.78% to 34,607.72 points. The balance of the shortened trading week due to the public holiday turned out to be a very weak, with a minus of around 2.2%. The broader S&P 500, peppered with more technology stocks, lost 0.77% on Friday, and even the technology-heavy Nasdaq 100, which had reached a record high just 3 days ago, fell by 0.77%. And now let's go to Washington in the United States. The US State Department has again expressed serious concern about the conflict in northern Ethiopia and the associated human rights violations. We condemn all such crimes against civilians in the strongest, said spokesman Ned Price on Friday. He called on all parties to the conflict to abide by international law and to strive for a ceasefire. Transparent and independent mechanisms to hold those responsible for human rights violations accountable are essential for political reconciliation and peace. According to the United Nations, the humanitarian situation in Tigray has worsened rapidly in recent weeks. In November, the Ethiopian government had launched a military offensive against the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, which had been in power in the region of the same name until then. The current conflict has displaced hundreds of thousands of people, and it did wreak havoc. The background to the conflict in the northern East African country were years of tensions between the TPLF and the central government is heavy. The TPLF dominated Ethiopia for a good 25 years until Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018 and ousted the TPLF. Many people in Tigray feel that they are not represented by the central government and are demanding more autonomy. That's the news for today. I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.